the end of the career and the end of the life is when you're dead. I mean, there's no end. There's no end. It's too exciting. Life is too profoundly amazing to think that it's over.
They say the heart has a memory of its own, but for Diane Keaton, the screen's most enigmatic muse, those memories aren't just ghosts. They are the architects of a beautifully solitary life. What is the price of total independence? For decades, she was the woman who redefined the leading lady, decked in ties, waistcoats, and an impenetrable sense of self. But behind the iconic laugh and the flickering frames of Annie Hall lies a silent gallery of what-ifs. Were these legendary romances destined to fail, or was she running from a version of herself she wasn't ready to meet? Today we explore the 7 men Diane Keaton reportedly named as her greatest regrets. Woody Allen. The year was 1968. The setting was a drafty audition room for a Broadway production of Play It Again, Sam. When Diane Keaton walked into the room, she was not yet the high-collar, wide-legged trouser icon the world would eventually imitate. She was a 22-year-old girl from Santa Ana with a nervous energy that seemed to vibrate off the walls. Woody Allen, already a rising neurotic genius of the New York comedy scene, was immediately transfixed. He did not just see an actress. He saw a mirror of his own internal chaos, but one that was wrapped in a strange California sunshine. Their partnership became the definitive intellectual romance of the 1970s. It was a time of grainy film stocks and existential coffee shop debates. To understand their golden age status, one must realize that they were the royalty of the New Hollywood movement. They represented a shift away from the polished, untouchable stars of the 50s toward something raw, awkward, and deeply human. While other couples were photographed on red carpets in silk gowns, Diane and Woody were seen wandering through the Upper East Side in mismatched flannels, discussing Kierkegaard and death. Their breakup was not a singular explosion, but rather a slow, atmospheric dissolving of the romantic bond into something purely professional. The core mystery lies in the transition during the filming of Annie Hall. By the time the world fell in love with them as a couple on screen, they had already ceased being one in private. There is a chilling sense in their later collaborations. You can see it in the way Woody's camera lingers on her in Manhattan. It is the gaze of a man who has lost his muse but refuses to stop documenting her. The details of this era are thick and evocative. Imagine a 2 a.m. editing suite filled with the smell of stale cigarettes and the rhythmic clicking of a Steenbeck film cutter. As Diane's fame skyrocketed, the intimacy that fueled that fame became a cold spot in her personal life. She was being immortalized as the perfect companion while simultaneously drifting into a profound, independent solitude. The eerie perfection of their on-screen chemistry acted as a mask for the quiet heartbreak of 2 people who had outgrown the very roles they created for each other. Ultimately, the humanizing truth of the Woody Allen chapter is found in the unfinished business of their connection. Decades later, Diane would describe him as the man who gave her everything, yet he is the one man she could never truly stay with. There is a profound loneliness in being the world's most famous muse. It means your identity is forever tied to the vision of another person. Her regret is not that she left, but perhaps that she allowed the architect to build a version of her that she could never fully inhabit. She was the star of his universe, but she had to leave that universe to find out if she actually existed without him. Al Pacino. If Woody Allen was the architect of Diane's mind, Al Pacino was the earthquake that leveled her heart. Their story began in the shadow of the Corleone family on the set of The Godfather in 1971. At the time, Pacino was a volatile, brooding force of nature from the New York stage, and Diane was the waspy outsider cast as Kay Adams. The chemistry was not immediate. It was a slow burn that ignited amidst the chilling silence of the movie's dark, oak-paneled sets. While the world watched Michael Corleone descend into moral darkness, Diane was falling for the man behind the cold, calculating eyes. To understand their golden age status, one must visualize the sheer power of this pairing. They were the king and queen of the most influential cinematic trilogy in history. Yet their off-screen life was an intense passion and frustrating ambiguity. Pacino was a man who lived entirely within his craft, one who often felt more like a ghost than a boyfriend. Diane later admitted that she was mad for him, spending years trying to pin down a man who was essentially a shadow. The irony of their relationship was that the more she loved him, the more he seemed to retreat into the eerie perfection of his own solitude. The incident that ultimately defined this chapter was the infamous marriage ultimatum. By the time they were filming The Godfather Part 3 in the late 80s, Diane had reached a breaking point. She wanted a commitment, a ring, and a future that existed outside of a film set. She gave the king a choice: marry her or lose her forever. Pacino, true to his enigmatic nature, did not choose the ring. The core tragedy lies in that specific moment of silence. It was a cold spot in her life that never truly warmed up again. She walked away from the man she considered the love of her life because he couldn't step out of the darkness of his own world. The sensory details of their final days together are heavy with tragic irony. Imagine the stark, clinical light of a Hollywood soundstage where they had to play husband and wife while their real-world connection was crumbling. There is a watchful presence of what might have been, a haunting feeling that they were two titans who were simply born to miss each other. The biting scent of expensive cigars and the muffled sounds of a lonely Italian villa during filming served as the backdrop for their final, silent goodbye. The humanizing conclusion of this entry is perhaps the most heartbreaking in the entire documentary. Years later, Diane would speak of Al with a reverence that borders on grief. She didn't just regret the breakup. She regretted the fact that she couldn't be enough to change him. There is a profound loneliness in being the woman who almost tamed the lion. Her legacy with Pacino is one of a cinematic romance that ended with a door closing, much like the final shot of the movie that brought them together. She remains the woman who stood on the outside of the door while the man she loved sat alone in the dark. Warren Beatty. In the late 1970s, Hollywood was a landscape of excess and ambition, and no one navigated that terrain with more calculated grace than Warren Beatty. He was the golden standard, a man whose reputation for breaking hearts was as legendary as his ability to produce cinematic masterpieces. When he cast Diane Keaton in his passion project, the 1981 epic Reds, he was not just looking for a leading lady to play the revolutionary Louise Bryant. He was looking for a partner who could match his intellectual fervor and his relentless drive for perfection. To the public, they were the ultimate power couple, two beautiful, brilliant icons who seemed to have found a mirror in one another. Beatty was a man who owned the light, one who controlled every frame of his life. Diane, fresh off her success with Woody Allen, was transitioning into a more mature, powerful version of herself. Their relationship was a collision of two egos that were perhaps too large to occupy the same space for long. They were the center of the universe, yet the core of their romance was a restless energy that neither could truly settle. The incident that defined their time together was the grueling production of Reds itself. Beatty was a notorious perfectionist, often demanding dozens of takes for a single scene. This professional intensity bled into their personal life, creating a chilling environment where the line between the director and the lover became dangerously blurred. Diane later recounted the experience of being pushed to her emotional limits by the man she loved, all for the sake of the art they were creating. Sadly, the very project that solidified their status as a legendary duo was the same one that began to tear them apart. The pressure of being the golden couple was a weight that eventually became unsustainable. The sensory details of this era are vivid and steeped in elegant sensationalism. Imagine the biting scent of old film reels and the flickering amber of a private screening room where they watch their own lives play out on a giant screen. There is a way the paparazzi followed them, capturing the cold spots that began to appear in their public appearances. You can almost feel the restless, watchful eyes of a town that expected them to be perfect, even as they were privately unraveling. The shimmering heat of a Hollywood premiere hid the reality of two people who were becoming strangers in the middle of a crowd. Ultimately, the humanizing conclusion of the Warren Beatty chapter is a story of missed opportunities. Diane has often spoken of her admiration for Warren, noting that he was a man who truly saw her, yet he was also a man who could never be tamed. Her regret is not that they failed, but that they couldn't find a way to exist without their own fame. There is a profound loneliness in being part of a masterpiece if you lose the person you made it with. She remains the woman who walked away from the golden standard to preserve her own soul, leaving behind a memory of a love that was as epic and as doomed as the movie that defined it. Steve Martin. By the time the 90s arrived, Diane Keaton had already survived the intense intellectualism of Woody Allen and the brooding storms of Al Pacino. The world was ready for a different version of her, and they found it in the warm, domestic glow of the Father of the Bride franchise. Opposite her was Steve Martin, a man who had transitioned from a wild and crazy stand-up comedian into Hollywood's favorite silver-haired father figure. Together, they represented the golden age of modern romantic comedy. They were the quintessential American couple, affluent, witty, and deeply devoted. Their on-screen chemistry was so seamless that it felt less like acting and more like a window into a private, happy life. For a generation of moviegoers, Diane and Steve were the ultimate parental ideals. They were not the volatile rebels of the 70s. They were the anchors of the family. Yet, beneath the polished surface of Nancy Meyer's beautifully decorated sets, there was a whisper of what might have been. Steve and Diane had actually known each other since their college days at Santa Ana College in the mid-60s, where she was the star and he was a mere stagehand. This long history created a watchful presence between them, a deep-seated familiarity that translated into an almost supernatural rapport on camera. While they played the perfect married couple for years, their real lives remained strictly separate. The core mystery lies in the perfection of their fictional marriage compared to their solitary realities. Fans desperately wanted the Banks family to be real, but the cameras always stopped, and the two stars went home to their own separate worlds. There is a cold spot in the realization that such profound chemistry never culminated in a real-world commitment. Diane later joked that they were both idiots, a light-hearted hedge that masked a deeper heartbreak of their legacy. They were the best friends who could never quite find the right timing to be anything more. The conclusion of the Steve Martin chapter is one of bittersweet friendship. Following her passing in late 2025, Steve's tributes revealed a man who truly loved her, not just as a co-star, but as a lifelong confidant who had been in his orbit for over 60 years. Her regret, according to some, was the missed opportunity to turn that comedy of sorrow into a lasting reality. There is a profound loneliness in being the most beloved couple in America, while remaining fundamentally alone. Their story is a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful connections are the ones that stay unresolved, flickering forever in the soft light of a cinema screen. Edward Ruscha. By the early 1980s, Diane Keaton was seeking an escape from the relentless machinery of the Hollywood studio system. She found her sanctuary in the cool, detached world of the Los Angeles art scene. This was the era of the artistic ghost, a period defined by her relationship with Edward Ruscha. Ed Ruscha was the maverick of the West Coast pop art movement, a man who transformed words and gasoline stations into high art. He was the antithesis of the dramatic leading men she had previously loved. Where Pacino was fire and Woody Allen was neurotic air, Ruscha was earth and stone. He was a silent presence who preferred the quiet hum of a studio to the frantic energy of a film set. Diane was no longer just an actress. She was becoming a serious photographer and a collector of rare architectural books. Her golden age status in this world was that of a sophisticated patron. She and Ruscha were the darlings of the Getty and LACMA circles, representing a fusion of cinematic glamour and avant-garde intellect. Their romance shared aesthetic values. They traveled through the American West, capturing the eerie beauty of abandoned buildings and neon signs. For Diane, Ruscha represented a life that didn't require a script or a director. It was a romance of the eye rather than the ego. The incident that ultimately haunted this relationship was its quiet, almost imperceptible dissolution. There was no explosive ultimatum or public scandal. Instead, it was a slow fading of colors, much like the vintage prints Ruscha was famous for. The core tragedy lies in the unresolved nature of their parting. They simply drifted back into their own separate artistic dimensions. The tragic irony was that while they shared a profound visual language, they couldn't seem to translate that into a permanent domestic reality. Ruscha remained in her life for decades, a ghost of a life she might have led if she had chosen the gallery over the soundstage. The sensory details of their time together are steeped in the elegant sensationalism of the high art world. There is a quality to the way they explored the desert, surrounded by the flickering amber of a setting sun against a Standard Oil sign. The silence of a white-walled gallery at midnight provided a stark contrast to the noisy premieres of her past. You can almost feel the cold spots in their shared history, the moments where words were replaced by images, leaving a profound sense of unfinished business that Diane would carry with her for the rest of her life. Edward Ruscha's chapter reveals a woman who was deeply lonely even in the midst of creative brilliance. According to some, her regret regarding Ruscha was the realization that she had treated him more like an inspiration than a partner. She loved the art of him more than the man himself. There is a profound heartbreak in realizing that you have turned the person you love into a watchful presence rather than a living, breathing companion. Following her passing on October 11, 2025, many looked back at her photographic work and saw a woman who was always looking for something she could never quite capture. Her legacy with Ruscha remains a beautiful testament to a love that was designed for a museum, but not for a home. The Lost Youth, a choice of two worlds. Long before the world knew her as the high-collar icon of Annie Hall, there was a girl named Diane Hall in Santa Ana, California. This was a chapter of her life defined by the shimmering heat of a suburban adolescence, a period where the stakes of love were measured in shared soda cans and the amateur theater. While she eventually became the muse of cinematic titans, her earliest heartbreak occurred far from the flashbulbs of Hollywood. It was a romance born in the mid-60s, a time when she was just a waspy girl with an undeniable drive to escape her small-town surroundings. In 1964, Diane was a student at Santa Ana College, a place where she first began to test the boundaries of her talent. It was here that she participated in a production of Carousel, an experience that would follow her for the rest of her life. To understand the golden age status of this chapter, one must look at the perfection of youth. She was a girl who wanted to be a movie star but possessed dreams that were really small. She was surrounded by a community of fellow dreamers, including a young stagehand named Steve Martin, who would remain in her orbit for over 60 years. The incident of this chapter was the profound, silent choice between the dream and the person. At 21, Diane was faced with a pivotal crossroads. She had a companion, an early love who represented the safety and stability of a traditional life. Yet her ambition was a force that could not be ignored. She made the decision to drop out of college and move to New York City to study at the neighborhood playhouse. This move was not just a career choice, it was a tragic irony of the highest order. To find herself, she had to leave behind the only person who had known her before she became Diane Keaton. The sensory details of this era are characterized by nostalgia. There is a silence in the memory of that final departure, a cold spot in her history where she traded a predictable future for the uncertainty of Manhattan. You can almost feel the restless energy of a girl who was willing to pay the price for a professional life, even if that price meant leaving a piece of her heart in a Santa Ana classroom. It was a tragic irony that the very tenacity that made her a star was the same force that necessitated her first great abandonment. Ultimately, the unresolved nature of this chapter lies in the what-if of a life not lived. Diane often described herself at 21 as undeveloped mentally, a girl who wanted lots of men to love her, but didn't yet know how to love back. The heartbreak of her legacy is the realization that by choosing the dream, she inadvertently set a pattern for the rest of her life. She became a woman who was mad for brilliant, complex men, but could never quite bridge the gap between romance and commitment. There is a profound loneliness in being the architect of your own solitary empire. Decades later, she would look back at her mother's journals and her own teenage diaries, finding a girl who was always looking for something more. Her regret was not the move to New York, but perhaps that she could never truly return to the simplicity of that first love. She remained a woman who was always on the move, a watchful presence in her own life, forever seeking a home that she had traded away at 21. Following her passing on October 11, 2025, It became clear that this earliest choice was the foundation of the legendary, independent, and hauntingly beautiful life she ultimately led. Jack Nicholson. The final chapter of Diane Keaton's romantic gallery brings us to the dawn of the 21st century, a time when most Hollywood legends are expected to fade into the background. Instead, Diane stepped into the most iconic and unresolved spark of her later years. The setting was the 2003 production of Something's Gotta Give, a film that would not only revitalize her career, but also reunite her with the ultimate Hollywood rebel, Jack Nicholson. They had crossed paths decades earlier, but the restless energy of their youth had never quite aligned. It took the wisdom of maturity and the sharp wit of a Nancy Meyers script to finally bring these two titans into the same orbit. Jack Nicholson was the perennial playboy, a man whose watchful presence behind sunglasses had become a symbol of untouchable cool. Diane was the cerebral, independent woman who had successfully raised two children on her own. When they were cast as Erica Barry and Harry Sanborn, they weren't just playing characters, they were playing versions of their own public personas. The film explored the chilling fear of vulnerability in later life, a theme that resonated deeply with both actors. To the world, they were the golden couple of the boomer generation, proving that the shimmering heat of attraction does not have a shelf life. This is a beautiful, eerie blurring of reality and fiction. During the filming of a pivotal scene where Diane's character confesses her love, her performance was so raw and convincing that Nicholson actually broke character. He turned to the director, Nancy Meyers, in a state of genuine shock, believing that Diane had just confessed her real-world feelings for him. This unexplainable phenomenon of truth leaking into art created a restless energy on set that lasted for the remainder of production. Rumors of an off-screen romance began to swirl, fueled by the flickering amber of their obvious affection for one another during press tours and award shows. The sensory details of this final flame are filled with tragic irony and vivid beauty. Imagine the biting scent of the salty Atlantic air at a Hamptons beach house, and the velvet hush of a moonlit bedroom where two legends discussed the heartbreak of their legacy. There is a way Jack looked at Diane, a mix of admiration and restless curiosity. The chilling realization for many fans was that while the movie ended with a reunion in the snow, the real-life story remained unresolved. They shared a deep, eerie bond that transcended friendship, yet they chose to remain in their own separate, solitary empires. Ultimately, the Jack Nicholson chapter is one of bittersweet timing. 2 years after the film premiered, Diane received a surprising check in the mail with a lot of zeros. It was a portion of Jack's own back-end profits from the movie, a silent, elegant gesture of respect and love. He didn't send a letter, he sent a legacy. Her regret, whispered in her later interviews, was perhaps that they had found each other when their walls were already too high to truly come down. She loved him with a watchful intensity, but she was already a woman who had mastered the art of being alone. Following her passing on October 11, 2025, from complications of pneumonia, the world looked back at the 2003 romance as the perfect coda to her life. At the 2026 Academy Awards, the In Memoriam segment featured a heartbreaking tribute that highlighted her singular spirit. Jack Nicholson, in a rare public reflection, described her as a woman who lived without limits. Their story remains a hauntingly beautiful reminder that some flames are meant to burn brightly and briefly, leaving behind a glow that never truly fades. Diane Keaton lived her life on her own terms, a legend with no end who turned her regrets into a golden masterpiece of independence. 7 men, 7 distinct eras of a life lived under the most intense scrutiny imaginable. Diane Keaton remains a woman who chose her craft over the stable presence of a partner. Is it truly a regret if it leads to a legacy that changed cinema forever? Perhaps these men weren't losses at all, but rather the necessary sacrifices for a woman who refused to be anyone's better half. She remains, as she always was, Diane, singular, iconic, and hauntingly complete. What do you think? Was Diane's choice of solitude the ultimate price of her genius? Or was there one man on this list she truly should have stayed for? Leave a comment below. If you found this deep dive into Hollywood's history captivating, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on those notifications to join us for our next video.